water is an absolutely essential and basic need. Therefore, something that is so universal and so essential surely ought to be completely in public hands. Most countries all around the world do not even countenance the idea of privatising water. They say it is our public responsibility to ensure that we conserve water and we provide clean and safe water for everybody. So when the government of Margaret Thatcher and others privatised water in the 1980s, many of us strongly opposed it. I think I'm the only member in the chamber that was here that had the privilege of voting against privatisation at that time. We predicted it would lead to a rip-off of the public sector. It would lead to asset stripping of the land and other resources that the water boards had built up. And also we pointed out that the water infrastructure we enjoy, the reservoirs in Wales, the reservoirs in Scotland, all the reservoirs all over England, the piping, the sewage works and all the other hugely complex infrastructures were all, for the most part, not all, but for the most part, were built by public enterprise and public investment. And we all laud the work of Bazalgette in producing a sewage system for London. That wasn't done by the private sector. It was done by Victorian investment in a public structure to bring about a proper treatment of sewage and treatment of water to provide clean water for the people of London. So can't we just be proud of the public investment that brought about the water system that we've got, and then recognise that since 1989, when water was privatised, when that bill went through, as the member pointed out, 72 billion pounds has been taken out in dividends by the water companies. That amounts to £2 billion a year not invested in water, not invested in new pipes, not invested in protecting the system we've got. These profits are absolutely extraordinary. And the member for Hackney South just pointed out quite correctly the levels of pollution that's flowing into our rivers now. I can't get my head around the idea that 300,000 hours of sewage is pumped into the Thames in the last year alone. Add that to the Severn, add that to the Trent, add that to the Humber, add that to the Mersey, add that to all the great rivers all over this country, and then you realise the scale of the problem we're dealing with. And then you also realise what happens to that. That goes into the sea, and what happens? That comes back in fish. That comes back in polluted water. It doesn't stop at the end of the river mouth. It goes into the oceans to create further global water pollution. Surely we can do much better than we are doing at the present time. And therefore, I absolutely welcome the Honourable Member's bill. And I invite members to look seriously at Clause 1 and Clause 2 of this bill. Clause 1 sets out the requirements on the Secretary of State. The requirements on the Secretary of State to look at issues of prioritisation of investment, collaboration with local authorities, use of natural flood management techniques, measurements to require local authorities to take into account the need for conservation, and so on. All incredibly sensible measures that can only be delivered by public authorities. Privatised water companies do not have their top line of conserving the natural world, the environment. They have as their top line, their middle line, their bottom line, their every line, the profits they can take out of it. And please, nobody tell me that that £72 billion that's been paid out in dividends has been reinvested in the British economy. No, it's in tax havens all over the world. We are subsidising tax havens all over the world on the back of our polluted and privatised water industry. And so the other section of the member's bill is the Commission on Water. Now, I think that is an absolutely fascinating proposal. When he talks about a commission of representatives of the water companies, privatised at the moment, hopefully publicly owned, representatives of unions in the water industry, environment and conservation groups, water users, which would be local businesses, and local authorities. And so I support public ownership of water strongly. But I don't envisage a sort of national water board where the Prime Minister, as a gift to his friends, puts them all on the nationalised water industry. So we have the British Water Board. No, what I would like to see is the existing river basin management system. So you have Thames, you have Severn Trent and so on. That makes sense because that's where the primary water supply comes from. And then you have the management of it through a commission, which includes the workforce, the trade unions, which includes all the local authorities in the area, which includes local businesses because they are supplying, they're using water as well as supplying services locally. And you have others that can be appointed from elsewhere. So you have a public buy-in to the structure that you've got, which would give us, I think, a much better system and a much more democratic system. So I just urge members to look with some imagination at what the member has put forward. If those that say we can't possibly bring this into public ownership because it might cost, well, the 1945 Labour government started by nationalising the Bank of England in 1946. I'll give you in a second. We started off by nationalising the Bank of England, went on to bring many other industries into public ownership, and even the Ted Heath government in 1971 brought Rolls-Royce into public ownership and created Rolls-Royce 1971 Limited because the company was failing. And the share price that was agreed on was set by Parliament. It wasn't set by the market in all those cases. You can do the same with this. Yes.
Thank you, the Honourable Ben. Generous intervention, allowing an intervention. He and I stood on a manifesto of public ownership of the utilities and water companies in 2019. It cost me my job, and the public decided to give Labour the worst electoral thumping in our history. Will he take some responsibility for that, and does he reflect on what he's advocating here now has already been rejected by this country?
Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, I thank the member for that incredibly friendly and helpful intervention. I'm most grateful. I'm most grateful for him and the collegiate way in which he put it forward. I couldn't put it better than myself. Let me say this. That manifesto included public ownership of that, and yes, indeed, other services as well, for a reason. For a reason that those industries needed to come into public ownership because they're failing. And you know what? That manifesto, individual policies were all well in the plus category. Over 70% supported public ownership of water. And it might be uncomfortable for him to understand this, but actually, the Labour Party in 2019 received more votes publicly, nationally, than it received in the recent general election. We have an electoral system that is unbelievably unfair, which brought about an enormous majority on a very low level of the total vote. So, you know, we can all play numbers at this. I don't resile from what was in that manifesto because it was put there by people who worked in the industry. The GMB and other unions took part in the consultation which brought about that policy on water. So I urge the member to look with some interest at the bill put forward by my friend the member for Norwich South, and recognise this is an opportunity to do something different. Now, there's been a debate, there's a lot of to and froing, about having a commission or a citizens' assembly. Why is everybody so scared of a citizens' assembly? What's the big problem? What's the big problem with it? Is it something in your heads? What's going on? Why would you be so worried about it? Citizens get together. I'll come to you in a minute. Citizens get together. No, I'm going to him first, then you. Citizens get together, put forward a proposal. You don't have to agree it. You don't have to accept it. It doesn't take away the powers of Parliament. It gives an opportunity for randomly selected, ordinary citizens to put forward a point of view. A lot of that was done in Scotland when we were talking about devolution. It's been done in other places. In Chile, it was done to develop a new constitution, some of which was ultimately rejected on a referendum. Does it take away the principle? Does it diminish the principle? No, I believe it does the very opposite. This country now suffers serious flooding almost every year, really, really serious flooding. And all of us have experienced the pain our constituents face, and indeed others face as a result of it. Part, but not all, of that is brought about by unusual weather patterns and excessive levels of rainfall. And we also need to think very seriously about natural river management and natural flood prevention, and that is specific in the Honourable Member's bill, and I think that is very important, because if you take, for example, the City of York, it is a confluence of rivers, it is in danger of flooding, it's always been in danger of flooding because it's got these rivers flowing into it. There is a combination of solutions, one of which is, yes, the flood defence walls, the concrete barriers and so on, to protect the central part of York from flooding. But it's also management of what you do upstream. Because if you deforest further upstream, if you build on floodplains and you prevent the river following its natural course, then you end up with flooding. So there are lots of actually quite small-scale natural defences one can put against flooding, i.e. don't build on floodplains, i.e. have rivers meandering rather than flowing in straight lines, i.e. letting beavers build their dams on confluent streams, and so on and so on. There's a whole lot of solutions, all of which add up to something quite valuable and quite good. That's not going to be thought about by water companies. That's going to be thought about by imagination. Farmers in Shropshire, for example, promoting exactly that kind of solution. Likewise, what happened with the River Parrett and its successive flooding has partly been resolved, not completely, but partly resolved by the work of the Environment Agency in recreating peat bogs up in the hills. There's a lot of things you can do. It requires the imagination. If you have a water company that's sole interest is in making money out of the water industry, they're not going to be interested in that. That's why it's the public as a whole that must have a voice in this, and that's what this bill actually does. And the levels of pollution are truly shocking. The sewage that flows in and the danger to all of us. So the water we drink is not pure, it's not clean, because there is a limit to how much you can do on scrubbing of water to make it clean. We end up drinking all kinds of foul things in our water, not to mention the microplastics that exist because of the excessive use of water bottles, plastic water bottles, because people don't trust the water supply. It breaks my heart. Every day I walk up Seven Sisters Road, every shop has a great stack of plastic bottles of water outside the shop because people don't trust the water. Wouldn't it be nice if we totally trusted our water and didn't feel the need to endlessly buy plastic bottles of water to keep us going through the day? And so last Saturday, I took part in a local People's Forum in Islington North, in my constituency, where we invited people to come to discuss water and water supply. And the hall was completely full, and it was also followed online by a number of other people. And we had two excellent speakers, John Bosco Nwogbo from We Own It, and Laura Reneka from Friends of the River Thames. They both spoke with passion, with knowledge, and with interest. And then we threw the questions open for discussion and asked each table to come up with their ideas. The commonality was, 1, clean water, 2, ownership and control, 3, the cost of water, and 4, their anger and irritation at Thames Water's lack of investment in the pipe network, lack of re-sleeving of the Victorian mains in so many places. So we've had major floods on Isleton Road, Stroud Green Road, Holloway Road, Seven Sisters Road in the recent past, not to mention one in Hackney North, not the member's constituency who's been speaking today, which flooded into our area. And the Sobel Centre, a sports centre near where I live, was flooded out, and it's now 2.5 years later. They're just completing the restitution works for the damage that was done. That is the irresponsibility of Thames Water in not investing in the network, and the short-term waste of money digging up short sections of road, replacing the pipe, filling it in again, and coming back next month to dig up a bit of a road 100 metres away to do exactly the same thing. We need a much more coherent and comprehensive approach to it. And so our bill, the bill today that the members put forward, gives us the chance to do something better and do something different. Make our water a public asset, a public resort. Take it away from those that have done so much damage to it, and instead, let's do something better and say we're going to provide for all of the people of this country good quality clean water. We'll stop polluting our rivers and seas, and we will have river basin management to ensure that flooding It's not ended, you're not going to end it completely, but at least under control through natural as well as other means. End the waste and start investing in a sustainable future for all of us. That's what our bill does today.
Yeah.